I was a principal and I was, looking to hire someone, and a teacher came in who was a special ed teacher, and they were talking about autism and all the things they like, but they couldn't show me proof of how they collect data, how they graph it, examples of IEPs, examples of how they modify lessons, and examples of behavior and visuals. I don't know if I would want to hire them. Hi everyone, it's Braylon and welcome back to my channel. If you're new to my channel, I'm a special ed teacher. I usually post vlogs or, special ed content about adaptations and modifications, but today I thought it would take a little bit of a different turn or a pivot.
Here we go, pivot! Pivot!
And talk about special ed interviews / teacher portfolios. So this is going to be a very long video. Definitely look at the parts that you need. Please don't feel like you need all of it if you're not in this life stage. So I have a few disclaimers. I feel like I always have disclaimers in all of my videos. I apologize. My first thing is that if this is going to stress you out because you are not in a position where you are ready to talk about getting a teaching job or working on a teaching portfolio or talking about an interview, click off. Save the video, watch it another time. I don't want to trigger anyone, and I know that when I was a senior in college and then my second year of grad school, I definitely did have a little bit of anxiety about finding a job and interviewing. If I can say one thing, it's that you will find a job. It's not a guarantee, but for the most part, most people do find jobs. Sometimes it happens right before the school year starts, and that has happened to me, but you will probably find one and you'll definitely be qualified for it, and you'll definitely have no idea what you're doing because none of us have any idea what we're doing even still. And so please don't stress out about it. And if this video is going to trigger you, then please sign off. My second thing that I want to say, and I feel like I always make this very clear in every vlog or video I ever make, is that I never want to push products on you or feel like you have to buy something in order to be elevated to the next level. I will be using my product as an example just because I made it and because it's something that I've been fiddling with, but you could watch this whole video, take notes on the different sections that I'm talking about, and then recreate it yourself in Google Slides for free. You really don't need to buy anything, and I really want to make that clear. So the first thing I want to talk about is I want to talk to student teachers. And even if you're a teacher who's currently working, you might eventually get a student teacher or be a mentor of some kind or have friends that are looking to get into the field. It's either for student teachers or for teachers who are looking to switch schools or switch districts. So as a student teacher, I remember that one of the biggest things that I did was I kept everything. I kept every, piece of paper or visual or cool creative thing that we redid, assessments we redid, running records. I kept all of those things because I knew that I would probably need them down the road, and I have utilized a lot of those things in the future. I've had some really bad student teaching experiences, and so I didn't keep anything from those teachers who were so horrible, but I was at least able to see the things that I wanted and that I didn't want. If you're a student teacher even now, or you're going to be a student teacher in the upcoming years, my biggest piece of advice would, besides keeping everything, would be to take pictures. And that sounds kind of weird. Don't take pictures of kids. Don't take pictures of kids' names, but parts of classrooms that you would think you'd want to replicate. I know that Instagram is really good for that because you see all these really cool things you want to put in your classroom, which can lead to you spending thousands of dollars. So please don't do that. But taking pictures of rooms that you've actually worked in, because later on we'll talk about the teaching portfolio. I really think having proof of, what you've done and proof of rooms and how you've reorganized them are really, really important. Even though it sounds stupid, keep your lesson plans. I've never used them again, but I have used them in portfolios and referenced them occasionally. So keep the lesson plans that you wrote for your student teaching or for your real classroom if you've been teaching for the last couple of years. I found that to be really helpful. And keep all of the visuals that you've made or that teachers have shared with you, keep them all a digital copy because they will definitely be helpful for you. Another time when I was in grad school, in one of my practicums, I remember they were doing like a new model. I think it was like the Teach model or something, and they had a lot of tasks. I took a picture of so many of the tasks that I had created. I had done them on my own time, you know, for the specific students that I really liked. I took a picture of all of them, some really cool ones, some really low-tech ones, pictures of more high-tech things that I had helped with in some way, you know, lessons that I had adapted or visuals I had made. I just kept a lot of record of those, one for myself and two for the future and for the future jobs that I would apply to. Oh, another thing, if you're a student teacher, I actually didn't even add this to the list, but you know, whatever school you've been to or you've worked in, keep a record of the curriculum that you used at that school. So I remember like having a long list of like, I was at a school where they used everyday math and where they used Storytown and all these things. And so when I went to interviews, they usually ask, like, what are you comfortable teaching with, or what have you used in the past? Is it scripted? Is it unscripted? Whatever. I could go through the list of the ones that I had worked with and then how I had adapted those curriculums, and that was like really, really helpful for them to kind of see what I had done. Now I want to shift to teaching interviews / teaching portfolio. So for teaching interviews, I mean, it's kind of tricky, especially like a year like this where not everybody's meeting in person. I did meet in person with my interview because it happened right before COVID started, but I do think that it's important to still send along information about yourself, even if you're going to meet them in person. You know, looking for all the interviews. It's okay if you apply to a bunch of jobs and go on the interview just to practice. And I really do think that as a special ed teacher, we just have so much knowledge already, even if you've never taught before, that look really good to school districts, and you're pretty much guaranteed to really like excel in that interview and really like prove yourself worthy by the knowledge that you already have from the classes that you took. I'm not going to get into teacher interview questions. I've already made a video about that. But I do think it's worth, you know, researching and looking up the most common interview questions and figuring out what you want to get across. One of the things that I've noticed about the internet is that there are so many portfolios / videos about teachers and getting a job, but they really don't have a lot to do with special ed. And I think that special ed is super nuanced because chances are you get whatever job you get, you're going to be put in a classroom with kids that you don't know with some complex needs, or you're going to be, you know, pulling kids out or pushing into services where students have a lot of needs and need a lot of support, and it requires a level of creativity and just maneuvering that's very different, just different than general ed. So what I found my first round of interviews was that no matter what teaching portfolio I used, it never was adequate enough for what I wanted to show to a school district. And some people don't use portfolios. My last round of interviews, I used not really a portfolio, but all of this information that I'm going to show you, honestly, just in like folders to show them. It was kind of like the same thing, but it just wasn't like bound or anything. But I really do think that finding a way to showcase the things that you know is so important. So actually a fun story is that for my round of interviews last year, when I actually came to the school that I'm currently at, I interviewed with them, with the principal, with, you know, a few other people, and what I didn't know at the time is that they had been building up this special ed program that they currently have, and they had really been feeling like they wanted more of a streamlined process of how to plan and have like a weekly plan that flows from the one week to the next, and, you know, find more modifications for the work that they were already doing in their general classrooms. And those were things that I was already really excited about and passionate about. And so I actually brought proof, photos, physical proof of like, this is what my lesson plans look like for the week. Really, really simple. The same ones I've shown you guys on the vlogs a bunch of times. And this is what it looks like when I take a grade level text and I modify it. And that was really important to them because that was what they were looking for. And so you just never know what a school is like looking for. And so having photo proof and video proof of things is like so key. I think that, you know, interviews are already scary and terrifying, but highlighting the things that you know that you're really good at or that you're really excited about really will make a world of difference. Some words that I think school districts are really excited about right now is engagement and behavior and how to modify and how to get students back on grade level and the interventions that you've done. And so all of those are like really cool like buzzwords that I think don't just use them like willy-nilly, but being like really confident in what those words mean and how you utilize them. Again, I'm going to use my product for reference just because it was made by me and it is exactly what I would have done if I had been interviewing this year. I have a product, it's just in Google, so it has a couple of versions. It has the example portfolio, which I'm going to go through today. For you, you could even use that portfolio and just like replace my name and replace the images, and I would never care. Use it for every interview. Don't care. But I also have a version that's clickable with clickable links that you can send, and then I have a blank version. And the reason I only did it in Google is because you can build everything in Google Slides and then print it like you would any other portfolio. And I want to add that if you're interviewing, you can interview with a binder portfolio if you have the time for that, or when you apply, you can also, add the link to this Google Drive version or this Google Slides version with a view only, and people can go back through and look at all of that you've done with the photos and all the things that I'm going to talk about. I printed off my example portfolio for this video, and I'm really excited about it because it's essentially like the portfolio that I've used a bunch of times. I just never made it into anything special. I put a couple like categories that I felt like were the most important. In a general ed portfolio, like what most people talk about on social media or what's mostly on Teachers Pay Teachers, they have, your lessons, and then they have one section for like basic accommodation, and then one section for like, I don't even know, like it's very like clearly, how do I say this in a nice way? Most portfolios are really beautifully made, but they really target general ed, and I felt like special ed had a lot of different things that they would, or that we would want to highlight. And I truly believe that like if I was a principal and I was, looking to hire someone, and a teacher came in who was a special ed teacher, and they were talking about like, autism and all the things they like, but they couldn't show me proof of how they collect data, how they graph it, examples of IEPs, examples of how they modify lessons, and examples of behavior and visuals. I don't know if I would want to hire them, because that is literally the job, is how to take a lesson, modify it, how to work with challenging behavior or get students to, start to produce work and engage in a classroom, how to include them, and what visuals you're using and what prompts you're using. Like those are so key. So that is exactly what I have on my table of contents. So I'm going to flip through this and kind of show you. The way I'm going to do it is I'm actually going to record my screen, and we're going to go through the entire digital portfolio so that I can show you everything.
This is Braylon recording. So I want to show you the digital version of this portfolio. This is in the pack if you choose to buy it, but you, again, do not have to. You can just create this yourself and then go about your business. So here's the table of contents. I have personal information, class organization, example IEPs, lesson plans, team collab, data collection, behavior management, classroom schedule, and promoting independence. And I'm going to scroll right down and show you all of the different elements in my example portfolio. Each of these buttons is clickable, which is really, really helpful. So sorry, a car drove by. So anyway, all right, so the first section is the personal information. I included like a resume template to put a resume in this area, but you definitely don't have to. I do think that if you put a resume in a portfolio or even send it to a school, it should be pretty detailed with like important information. One of the other pieces that I thought was important was like a get to know you page. Obviously this one is like silly. It has like my like logo on it, but still kind of like my basic information. Some people do put letters of recommendation, especially if it's in like a binder portfolio. But I do think that if you're in like a digital portfolio, you can always like take a screenshot of it, or you can just like nix the whole thing. But here is the next section, section, which is classroom organization, and see all of these buttons are clickable, so it'll take you right to that slide. I really think that this is important to have an area about classroom organization. For example, this is a classroom layout, and I'm going to link down below a video from my friend Maylene. She made a really cool video about how to create it in PowerPoint, which is the same thing as Google Slides, of how to make a layout. I think that thinking about where you want your group tables to be, where you want your student tables, how you want to organize a room is important, and it kind of lends itself to the next few sections, such as this, like classroom, like how to have independent stations and what those are going to look like. Again, like the previous part of this video, it's either things that you've done or things that you want to do or inspiration that you have, how you do your whole group and small group and goals for your classroom. And again, all of these pictures are from my classrooms to kind of highlight some of those things, how I organize my materials or the different areas, what those look like, and kind of my philosophy on it. So along with that is just whole group areas and kind of what my philosophy is of how I want to teach whole group. Another area of a portfolio for special ed is IEPs. And like, this is just a silly like example of an IEP. Like I picked a random name, some of the outlines. I think if you're going to use an IEP that you've actually created, you have to redact like literally everything and get permission to use that. Or you can recreate a fake child and write some examples. Here you could write like components or what you like to include in an IEP. Every state is different, every country is different, but just having the elements, maybe the parts that you really like, or like how you like to write your who knows, like present level of performance or whatever. Here's an example IEP goal that I had written for a previous video, but I just like took a screenshot of it and included it here just to give like an idea of IEPs, because that's such a big part of the job. So to include anything about how you wrote it or how you write your goals or your objectives, that's a really, really important concept to include. And obviously schools are different, so things might change. I always like to include examples of IEP materials. Every teacher does it different, but I use a bin where once a week, I like test my students based off of their goals so that I can collect data. And in that bin is all of the things that that they would need to be tested on their specific goals. So if they're working on letters, then there's letter cards in there that we'll go through every week, and I'll keep track of, how many they got right and how many they got wrong, so I can add it to my data, and that's an important part of my classroom. I added another section here, and again, if you're making this from scratch by yourself, go for it. I added a section about lesson plans. There are so many different components here. I thought that it was important, like as a special ed teacher, to kind of differentiate the different ones. So a reading lesson, a math lesson, a writing lesson, how you would do modifications and accommodations and assistive tech, because those are all like different parts of lessons depending on if you're applying to be like a self-contained teacher, or maybe you're applying to be like a pull-out teacher. I included an example of my like lesson plan of how I do my whole week, and so how I write all that out. I also included, you guys have seen this in the vlog, but how I plan my week and how I organize it so that I only plan at school. So just how I have all of those pieces there and what it looks like so that me or staff can have easy access to it. This is a reading lesson plan that I made when I was a student teacher. I just took a screenshot of it just to include in this example. But, any examples of lessons and how you kind of modified those, examples of math lessons. Obviously, when you're like an actual teacher, you're not going to write a whole 3-page lesson plan for like 20 minutes of the day. But it's good to include like your thought process in it, I guess. So I used that, an example of a writing lesson. Honestly, I found this on the internet and took a screenshot of it. So just for this example, portfolio, ways that you can differentiate plans. I think that's important to show schools how not just a lesson plan, but how you would differentiate or include some accommodations. This is a checklist that I use for accommodations, and it's kind of similar, just to kind of prove to schools that you're thinking about these things. One of the other things for classroom accommodations that I use are dividers and headphones and like things for people's seats or things under the tables to like move their feet so that they can focus better. So I like to include little pictures of those. It just kind of highlights some of the things that I do that are just kind of universal or classroom wide to support students. And I think that's an important thing to highlight in your portfolio. Another piece that I'm very passionate about, and I think I want to include somewhere to show people, is modifications. And how do you take a grade level text and modify it, or how do you have like a whole group reading lesson and find a way to modify it for all the different types of learners. Pictures are just the best way to get that point across. I also added a little spot in here for assistive tech, because that's a really important piece in a classroom. Whether you've used them before or not, just even if it's showing like ways you collaborate with the different professionals, it's important. I also added a whole section on collaboration, and I think that sorry, there's a loud car driving by. I think that this is like so important. So how you collaborate with your team is important to highlight in an interview, also just to like show that you have that skill. So I use this checklist just to highlight like important pieces of like what my paraprofessionals need. So do they need information ahead of time? How do they want to, receive feedback or anything like that? And then this is an example of some of like my schedule without kids' names or anything. So how I organize schedules so that it's really clear to me or to the other staff where students will be or what my classroom is going to be like. I think that that's like really important. So the next part is data collection. And I think that honestly, this is one of the most important parts to highlight. Data collection is something that I think a lot of people don't understand, but it's so important to the job. And also I think that schools either have really good and thorough like examples of data collection, or they don't. So highlighting what you do use and what you do know. So showing data sheets and ways that you use it. I use Google Drive, and so even if a school uses a different system, like it's easy to kind of translate those Google Drive skills to whatever the school's data collection system is. And just I always want to make sure that I'm highlighting like I am taking data seriously. I am taking, information seriously. That's how it informs my learning. And these are the ways that I track, all of my stuff and all of my information. I also want to highlight that like you don't have to show like an example of every data sheet. You don't have to show an example of like kids' actual information if that's something that you don't have or you're not comfortable with, or if you're a student teacher, but highlighting how you would collect data. So for me, I showed before those data IEP bins, and here's some pretend graphs that I have that just highlight how I track every month and graph it, and how I use that to explain things to parents, and how that informs my teaching for the next quarter or the next month. So I think that showing examples of graphs is awesome. And the easy thing is that you can kind of make a fake kid and make some like graphs on Google Sheets and then screenshot those. And so it doesn't have to be as intimidating to show your data collection methods. So going on from graphing, one of the next parts is behavior management. And I think that for a lot of like general ed teachers, they include like one page on behavior management, but I think it's important to include a lot of things. So the visuals that you're using and really highlighting those for special ed, the transitions and how you give rewards and just your overall management style. I think also going through the process of articulating it for something like this or for an interview is helpful for when you do have staff, so you can like reiterate it to them and you can all be on the same page. So this is why pictures are so key, pictures of visuals, or I highlighted and showed pictures of how I transition them with slides, or how I give my rewards. And this is just an example of how I manage the schedule and how that kind of interacts with behaviors, that nothing is catching kids off guard. And that kind of leads me into the classroom schedule. Some of these pictures are mine. Some of these pictures honestly are from Google, but I think taking some time to think about the classroom schedule that either you have in your current classroom or what you want for your future classroom, and highlighting that. So taking a look at your schedule, if you have, examples of inclusion, or even if you don't have real examples, kind of taking some time to create fake ones of how you would include students in inclusion, different visuals that you've created or that you've used or that your cooperating teacher has. Always include something about social emotional learning or, emotions and regulation. Self-regulation is so important. So just different visuals that you've found or used around those areas is so important. And I think also, like, things don't have to look like that pretty. So you can make visuals if you want to and then take pictures of them for your portfolio, but even if they're like simple ones that you've used in the past, I think go for it. This is another area for promoting independence. If you've seen any of my vlogs, you know that like independent work and work tasks and school jobs are really important, but I think that most schools are really looking at how teachers are obviously teaching the content, but how they plan on promoting independence for the future, right? Because special ed is meant to eventually lead to less restrictive environments, and students will be able to be more independent as they get older. And so having a section about this is really important. And even if you don't have a system in place for work tasks or for how you do independent work, take some time to think through it. So I use a lot of these photo cases and work tasks. I showed some examples of the different areas and kind of school or class jobs. And so that's a really important thing to include.
That was a lot of information that I just threw at you, but I think that some of those topics are so important to talk about in an interview or in a meeting. Again, I do want to say that I feel like just having a portfolio and having it in your bag when you go to an interview is like not the way to go. You put all that effort in for nothing. But either sending something like this ahead of time so that they can like browse through, or as you're talking with them, being like, hey, I want to highlight some of the things that we do in my classroom or what I've done in the past. Can I just show you some proof of it? And then bringing out the pictures so that you can kind of flip through and show like, these are the things that I normally do. This is what we're working on. It makes it a little bit more interactive, because I can tell you in an interview, you're sitting there, you have like 4 or 5 people just asking you questions, like staring at you like this. Like, it's terrifying. Like, I would never want to be there unprepared without like either something to fiddle with or some talking point in order to kind of get my point across. I suggest like you jot down some of the main themes and then kind of go back through and decide what things you want to add and what things you don't want to add, or what's most important to you. I definitely, again, want to reiterate, you do not need to buy this, but if you want it and you want my example one, and then the other versions, the clickable link one and the blank one, feel free to go ahead. It's like $2 or something on Teachers Pay Teachers, and you need Google Drive in order to access it. But I think that having something to talk through is like really important. And if you are a student teacher right now, or you're about to start interviewing, like just be confident in what you know and what you've learned. And even if you're like, Braylon, I literally learned nothing, like this school didn't teach me anything, you probably know more than you think, and it might just take some time to like be creative and decide what you want to do. Anyway, I hope that this video was helpful. You guys are awesome. I'm so grateful for this whole community, and reach out. Let me know how it goes. Let me know what's working or what things you added to this portfolio, or how your portfolios have turned out. And if you get offered a job, I would love to celebrate that too. So just keep me in the loop. That would be super awesome. So, all right, you guys are the best. I will see you in the next video. Bye, everybody.